So can you tell me what is demand?
Yes, sir.
Anyone?
Yes. Demand for a commodity is a desire to purchase backed purchasing.
Demand is the desire backed by purchasing
Anyone?
power.
Anyone? Don't speak everybody.
Demand is our desire that backed by purchasing power. Uh,
Yes, what the other person want to say? You want to say something else? Yes, Shakshi, you have raised your hand.
Yes, sir. I have okay, repeated a
Yes, go on.
demand for a commodity is a desire
You want to say something
to
else? So demand is basically a wish to have some commodity or service for which it is backed by your purchasing power. That means I want to have something, but I must have the my affordability to buy this commodity or the goods or the service. So a mere desire is not a demand. Say, for example, I want to have a Mercedes-Benz car, or I want to own a five-star hotel in Kolkata, but I simply don't have that much money in my pocket. So that those desires are not demand. So desire must be backed by purchasing power. Only then we call that demand. So demand is basically consumers' willingness to pay for a commodity or a service. Fine.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Next thing is law
Yes,
of
sir.
demand. Can anyone else want to say what is law of demand? Yes.
so according to this law, keeping all the factor constant, if the price of a commodity increases, the quantity demanded decreases and vice versa.
Right. So the law of demand says that if other things remaining unchanged, this is the most important thing, and most maximum students do not write this thing. If all other things remaining unchanged, I'm coming to that. What are the other things? As price increases, the quantity demand of the commodity decreases. So this is a inverse relationship between price and commodity quantity demanded of any commodity if other things remain unchanged. So if this kind of relationship exists between price and quantity of a commodity, then we call those commodities or services as normal good. Okay. So for normal good, we can have this inverse relationship. There is inverse relationship between price of a commodity, and so you can simply plot in a two diagrams dimension space. If we measure quantity demand of of any commodity, quantity demand in horizontal axis, and in vertical axis if we measure price. So as I said, the demand, this is will be the demand curve. So it will be a downward sloping. It can be a curve or it can be a straight line like this. Fine.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
So just like this figure one, here we are measuring price and quantity here. So this is a demand curve. typical demand curve, downward sloping demand curve. Now, next thing is called demand function. So what is a demand function? Demand function is basically denoted as this QD, Q subscript D. D stands for demand and Q stands for quantity. So it's quantity demanded of a commodity is a function, small f stands for function, is a function of these factors. What are these factors? This is P. P is the price of that particular good. Say if we are talking about price, quantity demand or demand function of a commodity, say T. So this QD is the quantity demand of T, which is a function of P. Price of that commodity means price of T itself, then the other factors. Now, what are these other factors? So when we are talking about this law of demand, we are saying that all other things remaining unchanged. So these are the other factors. There can be thousands of other factors. So we are taking here for 5 factors here. So one can think of many more factors. So what is PC? Don't talk in between. Mute yourselves. So PC is basically price of complementary good. And PS stands for price of substitute goods. And here M stands for income of the consumer. M, this M, capital M. T stands for taste of the consumer. E stands for expectation about the future price or future market condition, etc. So here P, PC, PS, M, T, E are all called factors or determinants of demand. And if any of these factors change, demand will change. Okay. So demand curve is basically a locus of different combination of price and quantity demanded given other factors. That means these other factors remaining unchanged. Now there is change in quantity demanded or movement along the demand curve. What is that? If these other factors remaining unchanged, and due to some reason, if price of the commodity, the concerned commodity decreases or increases, that means changes, if the price of the commodity changes, then quantity demand will also change. Say for example, here, if this is the demand curve, DD is the demand curve. So if the initial price is P0, so corresponding to the demand curve DD, the consumer was at the point A where he is demanding Q0 amount of the commodity. Now, if price due to some reason decreases to P1, then the consumer is moving along the demand curve to point B where he is willing to purchase Q1 amount of the commodity. Fine?
Yes, sir.
So if these other factors remaining unchanged and only the price of that particular commodity changes, then the quantity demanded is also changes, and that change will take place movement along the demand curve. So a movement from point A to point B due to the fall in price raises quantity demand by the consumer, so from Q0 to Q1. So here, if only the price of the good changes and all other factors of demand remaining unchanged, then there is change in quantity demanded. Okay, so this is called change in quantity demanded or movement along the demand curve. Fine? Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's move on. Next thing is change in demand or shift in the demand curve. Now, in this case, the own price of the commodity P remaining unchanged. Now come back to the demand function. Now we are talking about this P is remaining unchanged. The price of the commodity is not changing. We are not allowing the price of the commodity not to change. What we are allowing to change one of these factors at a time. So we are not allowing all these other factors to change simultaneously, but only one factor to change at one point of time. And we will see how this will affect the demand curve given the other factors, these remaining other factors unchanged. Is this clear? So in this case, the own price of the commodity is not changing, and what is changing? Any one of these other factors, not all the other factors. Fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, here the own price of the commodity remaining unchanged. Now, we first, if any one of the other factors change, then the demand curve shifts. How the demand curve shifts? Now, say we are assuming that PC increases. What is PC? Price of complementary good. So what will happen? What is complementary good? Can anyone tell me?
Sir, tea. Tea, coffee.
Tea, coffee is complementary good.
Complementary good is a good that we can use another if it is if one is unavailable.
No, it's not. You are talking
Sir, is
about
complementary
The
something which is
complementary
free?
goods are the jointly
Complementary
demanded goods.
jointly demanded.
That
Yes, sir.
is petrol and car.
yes, right.
Thank you, sir.
So
Sir, sugar and tea.
yes, sugar and tea. Now say we want to see how the demand curve of tea will be affected if, say, we are talking about tea and sugar. Now we are assuming that uh, consumers consume tea only with sugar. There is no other use of sugar. So sugar will be consumed only with tea. We are assuming that there are no diabetic people exists here. So, and here we are taking demand of tea, and here we have price of tea. Okay. Now say this is the initial demand curve, D0, D0. Fine. Now there is no change in price of tea. So price of tea is remaining same at, say, PT bar. Okay. Say চায়ের দাম 10 টাকা fixed. There is no change in price of tea. So if the price of tea is, say, 10 rupees per kg, then the consumer, say, purchases, say, this much Q0 amount of tea. Fine. Now this price of tea is not changing. What is changing? Price of sugar is changing. The price of sugar increases. Then what will happen? Can anyone say?
স্যার, চা খাওয়ার যে পরিমাণটা সেটা তুলনামূলক কমে যাবে মূলত, বা কেনার যে পরিমাণটা সেটা তুলনামূলক কমে যাবে। সরি স্যার, চায়ের না, সুগারের। কেনার পরিমাণটা তুলনামূলক কমবে।
Yes, because sugar is a normal good, so the demand for sugar D subscript S will fall, because as sugar is a normal good, so there will be an inverse relationship between price and quantity demand. So as price of sugar increases, quantity demanded of sugar must fall. Fine. চিনির দাম বাড়লে চিনির চাহিদা কমে যাবে। Till now,
Yes,
fine.
sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, চিনির as the demand for sugar is decreasing, and the consumers consume sugar only with tea. So as the demand for sugar decreases, demand for tea must
Decreases, sir. Decreases,
must
sir.
fall.
Decrease.
Must decreases.
So price of tea increases, and as a result of that, demand for tea decreases. So there is no change in price of tea. However, due to increase in price of sugar, demand for tea decreased. That means if the consumer at 10 rupees per kg of tea, if they are initially consuming Q0 amount of tea, now they will consume lesser amount, say Q1 amount of tea. Fine. So this point will be a point on our new demand curve. Now if we start with any other price, initial price of tea, say this is 5 rupees a kilo, then initially consumers would have demanded this much, but with rise in price of sugar, consumers are demanding, say for example, this much. So if we join these 2 points, basically, so this point, so we will get a new demand curve, D1, D1. So the entire demand curve is shifting to leftward. Is this clear to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Oh. So as I said here, the demand curve is shifting towards left. And this shift in demand curve is not because of a rise or change in price of tea. The price of tea is remaining unchanged. But because of a rise in price of sugar, the demand curve for tea shifting to the left. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, what will happen if the price of substitute goods increases? Now tell me, what is substitute goods?
Sir,
যে
substitute
সমস্ত
goods
দ্রব্য
are the
একের
goods
পরে
that
একের
we
পর
can.
পরিবর্তে অন্যটা ব্যবহার করা যায়।
ভাই একজন
Yes, sir.
স্যার
No,
যে
substitute goods are the goods that we can use in the other goods, like sir, tea
স্যার
and
যে
coffee.
Yes.
ইয়া
In
স্যার
place of other.
স্যার ফিশ অর মিট।
Yes, can. But so let us take tea and coffee. Tea and coffee. So as before, so substitute goods are those goods basically we do not consume these two goods together, but we consume any one of these two instead of the other goods. Say we do not consume tea and coffee simultaneously, we can have either tea or coffee. or for that matter, we can think of tea and sharbat. Fine.
Yes, sir.
So here again, as before, we take quantity demand of tea, and here we have price of tea. And so this is the initial demand curve, D0, D0. Now, again, as before, price of tea is not changing. Say price of tea is say 10 rupees, and at this price, the consumer is demanding say this much Q0 amount of tea. Fine. Now what is happening? Price of coffee, if price of coffee increases, so this C is not standing for complementary. This C stands for coffee. Okay. So what will happen if price of coffee goes up? Yes.
Sir, the demand of tea will the demand of tea increase.
I'm saying price of coffee increases.
Sir, when price of coffee increases, the demand of tea will increases. The
Step by
price
step,
of coffee increases, the demand of tea will increases.
what will happen to demand of coffee?
The demand of
Decrease.
coffee.
Sir,
Sir, the
demand of
demand of
coffee
coffee
decrease,
will
sir.
decrease.
Decrease.
Decrease,
Decrease,
sir.
sir. Will decrease.
Decrease.
Sir, tea.
So as coffee is also a normal good, so when price of coffee increases, demand for coffee will decrease by standard law of demand,
Yes,
inverse
sir.
relationship.
Yes, sir.
Fine.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
as demand for coffee decreases and tea and coffee are two substitute commodities, so to meet up the consumer's daily need, say a consumer drinks say 10 cups of tea or sugar to tea or coffee together, at most 10 cups. So as demand for coffee decreases, so to meet up their daily need, what the consumer will do, demand for tea will go up. Clear?
Increase. Increase, sir.
Yes, that I am saying. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
So just
Yes, sir.
think logically, things will be very easy. So price of coffee increases, as a result, demand for coffee will decrease. So to meet up their daily needs, demand for tea must increase. Okay. So without change in price of coffee, the consumer's demand would have been Q0, but now with a rise in price of coffee, the consumer demand for tea will be higher, say at Q1. The corresponding to that, at corresponding to this price, say this is 1 point on the new demand curve. Similarly, if you start with another price, initial price P of 5, say this is the initial demand, the new demand would have been somewhere here. So if we join these 2 points, you will get the new demand curve of T. So D1, D1. So the entire demand curve is shifting to the rightward, to the right side. Fine.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
बोलिए.
Yes, sir.
हाँ, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next is income. So what will happen if the consumer's income increases? Please mute yourselves. So tell me, how the demand curve will change.
Sir, repeat the question, please.
If consumers' income increases, then how the demand curve of the consumer will change.
The
Sir,
quantity will
if the
also increase.
consumer's income increases, the demand will also increases.
So what will happen to the demand curve?
Sir, it
Uh,
will move towards the right hand side.
Yes, sir. ডান দিকে সরে যাবে আরো, ডিমান্ড কার্ভটা
Right.
ডান দিকে সরে যাবে।
কেন যাবে?
Sir,
স্যার
because
তার
it
কারণ হচ্ছে
rises.
গিয়ে স্যার কারণ হচ্ছে গিয়ে যখন বাড়ছে, যখন চাহিদা বাড়ছে, তখন আমরা যখন চাহিদাটা পরিমাপ করব, তখন যে অনুভূমিক অক্ষ আছে সেই দিকে আরো বাড়িয়ে বাড়িয়ে যেতে থাকবো, সেহেতু ডিমান্ডটা আরো ডান দিকে সরে যেতে থাকবে।
Okay, now again, let us talk about the quantity demand of tea. So we are measuring here quantity demand of tea on the horizontal axis, and on the vertical axis we are measuring price of tea. So without any change in money income, say initially we are taking price equal to say 10 rupees per kg, okay? And initially the consumer's money income equal to say 100 rupees. So how much kg the consumer can purchase? 100 divided by 10.
90.
So the consumer can purchase at most 10 kgs of tea.
10 কেজিস।
So if the price of tea is 10 rupees a kilo, then the consumer is purchasing, say at this point, this is say 10 unit. Okay. Now at this same price, now if the consumer's money income now becomes 200 rupees, then how much the consumer can purchase?
20.
20.
স্যার 20 কেজিস।
So the new point on the demand curve will be somewhere here, 20 kg. Say this is the 20 kg, this much. So at price 10, the consumers can buy 20 kgs now. Now if we start with an initial, say think of different initial price, say 5 rupees a kg, then the consumers initially can buy how much? With 100 rupees income, the consumer can buy
20 kg.
10 units.
20 kg. So this is the old point on the previous demand curve, and now with 200 rupees income, how much the consumer can purchase?
20 কেজি স্যার।
20 kg.
20
No,
কেজিস।
no, no.
স্যার এখানে কোনো ডিফারেন্ট হচ্ছে না স্যার, 5 রুপিজে এন্ড 20 রুপিজে কোনো ডিফারেন্ট হচ্ছে না, কাস্টমার ওরকম থাকছে।
So
স্যার
200 by
প্লিজ কোশ্চেনটা
5.
আরেকবার একটু রিপিট করবেন স্যার।
I'm saying, say if the initial price is 5 rupees a kg, so with the initial income 100 rupees, the consumer can purchase
40,
how much?
40, sir, 40 kgs.
100 by 5. So
40
initially,
kg, sir.
yes, coming.
20
20
কেজি।
হচ্ছে।
So initially,
20 kg, sir.
the consumer can purchase 20 kg. So this is distance
Yes,
is
sir.
20. And with the
Yes,
new
sir,
income,
20 kg.
200 kg, 200 rupees, the consumer can purchase
40 kgs.
40. So the new point will be somewhere here, where 40 kg. So if we join these 2 points, you are getting the new demand curve, T1, T1. So as you can see, due to increase in money income, the price of tea is not changing. Only because of change in money income, the demand curve is shifting towards right.
Rightward.
Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
समझ में आ रहा है?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
हाँ
sir.
सर।
चलो अच्छा हुआ.
Yes, sir.
So tell me, What will happen if money income reduced?
The demand will also reduce.
The demand will also reduce, sir.
Yes,
How?
sir. The
Yes,
demand
sir.
will also reduce.
How?
Sir, please repeat the question once.
I'm saying that what will happen if the consumer's money income reduced or decreased?
Sir, it will shift towards left.
How?
As the
So if the consumer
income
doesn't have enough
decreases,
income, how will that consumer buy goods and meet his demands?
No, I'm not saying whether it is enough or not enough. I'm only
Sir,
saying
sir, can
I'm
I?
saying just let me finish. I'm saying only what will happen if the consumer's money income diminished or reduced? What will happen to the
স্যার
demand power of the consumer?
কনজিউমারের স্যার চাহিদার পরিমাণ কমে যাবে, ক্রয় ক্ষমতা কমে যাবে, এবং দ্রব্যের যে চাহিদা সেটা কমে যাবে, ক্রয় ক্ষমতা কম হবে, সরি স্যার, ক্রয় ক্ষমতা কম হবে যে কনজিউমার।
Fine, but what will
So the
happen to
curve
the
will shift towards left.
right? So the curve will shift to the left. It will look like somewhere here. Fine.
Right, sir.
So you have to have very clear-cut conceptual understanding. Otherwise, you cannot write answers. And it's more particularly for BCom students because you don't have to write anything, but you have to, you have to choose between 4 options because you will have multiple choice question type of questions in your exam, final exam, as well as internal exam. So you must have very clear understanding of these concepts. Okay, next thing is expectation and tastes. So what will happen if tastes and preferences changes in favor of any commodity? How the demand curve will change?
sir, repeat once, please.
I'm saying that if तुम्हें क्या क्या खाना पसंद है?
अपनी चाय एग्जांपल टा लिए चलूं सर।
चाय. Okay. Say अभी winter months are coming. So in the next month, say in December or January, you will prefer to have more cups of tea. So
Yes, sir.
that means the preference towards having more amount of tea will rise. Then what will happen to your demand curve or the consumer's
Sir,
demand
move
curve?
to
Sir,
right.
So it will be moved to the rightward.
it will increase.
স্যার মুভ টু লেফট সাইড, ইট উইল
Why?
মুভ টু লেফট সাইড।
Can you explain why?
Left is
Sir,
not
স্যার
demand is
যখন
sir, the demand of
Sir,
স্যার
tea is
বিকজ
demand
ডিমান্ড
is
ইজ
rising
ডিক্রিসিং।
in
sir, demand will be rise. So how it will go to left? It will go to right.
it go to
Yes.
right, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. The
Rising, the
demand
demand
is
curve will be
rising.
constant.
Okay, one at a time, please. Otherwise, no one can hear.
So will the demand curve be
Sir,
constant?
Now, this is the initial demand curve D0, D0.
যখন স্যার ডিমান্ড বাড়ছে তখন তখন তো মুভ রাইট হবে না স্যার, ও তো চায়ের ডিমান্ড তো বাড়ছে এখন তো।
স্যার আপনি
So,
প্রাইস বললেন না স্যার, ডিমান্ড বললেন, আর একবার যদি একটু রিপিট করেন স্যার।
demand. I'm saying that
Sir,
what will
डिमांड
happen
तो
if
बढ़ रहा है ना, तो
taste
डिमांड तो लेफ्टवर्ड जाएगा।
demand
बढ़
बढ़ेगा
रहा
तो
है, इसे लेफ्ट और कैसे
towards
जाएगा,
जाएगा.
राइट वर्ड जाएगा।
ओ
डिमांड
सॉरी,
बढ़
यस
रहा है,
राइटवर्ड जाएगा। डिमांड बढ़ रहा है तो वो राइटवर्ड जाएगा।
Let me
But
explain.
sir, it depends on the weather and climate and many other factors.
Yes.
या सर ने अभी कहा ना वेदर एंड
Yes,
जनवरी
sir.
दिसंबर एंड जनवरी सीजन।
हाँ
Then
Okay.
it
Can
will
I say?
move right.
স্যার ডান দিকে স্থান পরিবর্তন করবে।
Okay,
It's
say,
simply rising in demand, it will be moved in the right side.
okay. Let me explain it.
Yes, sir.
Say, initially, with the initial test and preference for T, say initially you are at with this price P0, the consumer is demanding this much amount of tea, say be it 5 cups of tea or whatever. So this is the initial demand of the consumer. Now suddenly, due to some reason, the concerned consumers favoring to have more amount of tea per day. So instead of 5 cups of tea, he or she started to have say 7 cups of tea every day. So instead of this point, the new point will be somewhere here at the same price. Okay, the price of tea is remaining unchanged. Now if you think of a different price to start with, say call it P1. Okay, initial demand is this much. Say initially the consumer is having say 10 cups of tea. Now with more taste and preference towards tea increase, so the new demand say for tea is say 13 cups. So this is some point like this. So if you join these 2 points, you will get the new demand curve D1, D1. So the entire demand curve is shifting rightward. So again, you can see the price of tea is not changing, only because change in taste and preference towards tea, the demand curve, the entire demand curve is shifting to the right. Fine?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now,
Yes,
instead
sir.
of tea, if this concerned commodity is say cold drinks, say then what will happen to the demand for cold drinks in summer months?
Sir, it
cold
will
drink demand,
also
The demand of
increase.
cold drink will rise.
sir, cold drink demand कम हो गया है ठंडा समय से cold drink demand कम हो गया है
In
It will
summer,
move
sir has told in summer.
right.
I'm saying summer months.
in
Curve will
So
shift
sir,
towards
you
right
are saying for the summer days?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
in
sir.
will
So
shift
in
towards
summer
right.
days, the cold drink demand will be rises.
So it will shift to
Yes,
the
sir.
right,
as
just like
such
here.
Right
tea
side.
will is
So the
decreases.
demand curve for the cold drink will shift towards right in summer season.
Yes, sir. The demand
Now what
demand
will
will rise and
now
it will be shift to the rightward side.
okay. So next thing is we'll talk about expectation. Expectation uh, about the future market price. Say this is say quantity demand of say diesel. Okay, and this is the price of diesel, and this is say initial demand curve D0 D0. Now people are expecting that tomorrow the price of diesel will go up. Then what will happen to the demand curve of the consumer?
It will shift
Rightward
towards
shifting.
right.
They will
Sorry, left,
purchase
left.
more.
Sir,
Rightward
towards
shifting.
The rightward side.
Komal
No, sir, it will
Komal
shift towards left.
sir,
Sir,
honest
what is your question? Please repeat.
স্যার যদি কাল পরের দিন বাড়ে তাহলে আজকের ডিমান্ডটা বাড়বে, আজকের দিক থেকে চিন্তা করলে ডিমান্ডটা বাড়বে, কিন্তু কালকের দিক থেকে যদি চিন্তা করা হয় তাহলে ডিমান্ডটা স্যার কমবে। আজকের দিক থেকে ডিমান্ড কার্ভটা রাইট সাইড সরে যাবে এবং কালকে ডিমান্ডটা লেফট সাইডে সরে যাবে।
We are talking about today. So my question is
Sir, what is your question? Please repeat.
yes, I'm coming. So this is the demand curve for diesel, and I'm saying that the consumer's expectation towards tomorrow's price of diesel is the consumer is expecting that tomorrow the price of diesel will go up, price of diesel will increase. Then what will happen to the demand curve of diesel today?
It
So
will
in
shift
the
towards
demand will
right.
be
It
rises.
will bend towards right.
Shifting to the rightwards.
Yes, sir, it will
Student
shift to the
demand
Sir,
will
rightward.
be increase.
For today
So,
only, it will be shift to the
বলছি
rightward.
so if this is the initial
বলছি
price, if this is
আজকে যখন আমাদেরকে আজকে আর লাগবে, কালকে ডিমান্ডটা কম হয়ে যাবে, তো কালকে সব নেবে পেট্রোল ডিজেল যেগুলো আছে, ডিজেল কালকে নেবে, আজকে নিতে টাকা অনেক লেগে যাবে, তাই জন্য।
no, I'm
আজকে
saying
কম আছে কিন্তু কালকে বেশি হবে, সেটা বলা হচ্ছে। স্যার সেটাই বলেছেন।
হ্যাঁ, কালকে বেশি হবে, আজকে কম আছে।
তো
সেটা তো
আজকে
আজকের
সব
ক্ষেত্রে ডিমান্ডটা কম বাড়বে, আজকের ক্ষেত্রে
so,
ডিমান্ডটা বাড়বে, কালকের
আজকের
ক্ষেত্রে
জন্য
কমবে।
শুধু ডিমান্ডটা বাড়বে।
হ্যাঁ, তো
হ্যাঁ,
আজকে ডিমান্ড পড়
okay, let me finish. So at this initial price P0, say without any role of expectation, the consumer is demanding this much. Now with the expectation, what the if the consumer expect that the price of diesel will increase tomorrow, so he will start buying more today itself and store the extra diesel for tomorrow's use. So at the same price, P0 price, the consumer's new demand will be somewhere here. So again, with a different price, consumer's new demand will somewhere here. So the new demand curve will be shifting parallelly rightward like this. Fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, now there are some exceptions to the demand curve. We till now we have talked about this downward sloping demand curve, but there are some special cases in which the demand curve can be upward sloping or positively sloping like this. One is called Giffen good. In case of Giffen goods, demand curve will be upward rising. That means when price of the commodity rises, demand of the commodity will also go up. So there is a positive relationship between price and quantity demand. Okay, why this will happen, we will explain it a little later when we will talk about consumer behavior after few more days. And there, in case of antique goods or conspicuous consumption, higher the price of good, the prestige value attached with those goods are higher. So as the price of those goods rises, the demand for those goods also rise. So the demand curve will be upward rising. So there is also Veblen effect and expectation about the price, etc. So Veblen effect, if a consumer judges the quality of the commodity by its price, that means when the price of the commodity is increases, then the consumer thinks that the quality of the commodity may be also being better. So then as the price of the commodity increases, the demand also increases. So the demand curve will be upward sloping. So till now we have talked about the demand of a particular consumer, but in a market there are several consumers, say maybe thousands of the consumers. So to arrive at market demand, what we need to do? So to know, to calculate the market price, we need to calculate the market demand. So how we can calculate the market demand? So this is the initial, this is the demand curve for consumer A. We are taking here only two consumers, consumer A and consumer B. And this is the consumer B's demand curve, DB, DB. And this is consumer A's demand curve, DA, DA. So take any price, initial price P0. Now at this price, how much the consumer A is demanding? So this distance is the demand by consumer A, demand of any commodity, say demand of tea. So consumer A is demanding at price P0. this much, Q0A amount of T, and consumer B from this demand curve, DB at price P0, consumer B is demanding this much, this distance, Q0B. So at this price, P0 price, what is the market demand? Market demand means consumer A and consumer B's demand. If we add this plus this distance plus this distance, that means Q0A plus Q0B, what we get is Q0. So the market demand combining consumer A and consumer B is Q0, amount of commodity at price P0. Similarly, take another price P1, where consumer A is demanding this much, consumer B is demanding this much, Q1B, and here Q1A. So at this P1 price, the consumer A's demand plus consumer B's demand is Q1, which is equal to Q1B plus Q1A. So you are getting a point like this. So if we join these 2 points, what we get is demand by consumer A plus consumer B. Now, in the same manner, if you keep on joining thousands of the consumers available in the market, you will get the market demand curve, this. So this is the market demand curve, and this market demand curve. So basically here we are adding the individual demands horizontally. That means at this price, any price, zero price, this demand plus this demand, so which that will be equal to this demand. So that is why we call it horizontal summation method. Fine.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
For
sir.
Yes, sir.
for, for mathematical questions.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, stop it. For mathematical questions, just note consumers A's demand curve, QA equal to, you can note it down, 5 minus 3P, QA equal to 5A, 5 minus 3P, and consumers B's demand equal to 10 minus 5P. Okay, so these are demand curve of consumer A and consumer B. So the market demand curve of consumer A and consumer B's demand. So QM, the market demand, is equal to QA plus QB. So if you add these two demand curves, what you are getting, QM equal to 15 minus 8P. Fine. So you can see the market demand curve, the slope is completely different from the individual demand curve. So individual demand curves, slope is here -3 and here -5. And in this case, it's -8. So you can see the demand curve of A's slope, and this is the slope of the consumer B's demand curve, and this is slope of the market demand curve. So this is a different from these two demand curves. So I'll stop here today. Tomorrow I'll.
Okay, sir. Sir, একটা problem আছে।
Yes.
Sir,